I was in my home office filling out an invoice for one of my customers when I heard my front door open. Generally, I call out to my wife, Christine, to say hello and let her know I am home. I held off because I was halfway down the page entering the itemized charges and did not want to lose my place. That hesitation served me well. "Hey girl, Jerry isn't home, is he?" I heard. I recognized the voice. It was Sandra, our neighbor and one of Christine's closest friends. She must have seen Christine get home and came over. "Nope. His car isn't in the drive or the garage. He said he had some stuff to do today. What's up?" My wife answered as she walked into the kitchen. I heard the fridge door open. I was only home without my car because it was in the shop. The dealership had given me a ride me home since it was closer than my regular office. I often worked from home, so I could work as well here as at my office downtown. "Great. You up for some fun tonight?" Sandra asked. "Want to get screwed?" Now that got my full attention. I forgot all about that invoice. I reached for my phone and began to record the conversation. Christine giggled. "I'd love to, but this is short notice. I'm not sure I can get away. Jerry said something about us going out to dinner. I thought I'd relax and have a glass or two of wine. Want some?" My home office was a converted room just off the kitchen. I clicked off the desk lamp and turned off the computer monitor. The door was slightly open, and I did not want either woman to realize I was listening. I heard the tinkle of glasses. They were too busy getting glasses out for their wine to hear me. "Oh, come on, help a girl out. Tammy was supposed to be my wing girl tonight, but her mother called. She is sick with some kind of stomach bug, so Tammy had to go over there and help out," Sandra said. We had a double date lined up with Eric and Rich. Tammy was the third component of the trio. They started calling themselves the Three Amigos back in college. Sandra and Christine attended the same high school. Tammy joined them their freshman year of college. The three roomed together for much of their time in college. I had always suspected they shared more than an apartment. I met Christine while in college, and we began dating our senior year. So I knew both Tammy and Sandra well. Both women had the sex drive and morals of minks. Both would screw at the drop of a hat. If they even sort of liked the guy, they'd sleep with them on a first date. They had both offered me a shot a few times. I turned them down because I was with Christine. Christine was far more reserved, the cautious one of the group. Not a prude by any means, but not a witch either. At least that had been my impression while we dated, and for the 7 years of our marriage. She had admittedly been pretty active sexually before we met, but she had always been loyal to me after that. I never had a reason to doubt her for any of the time we had been together. Until now, hearing this conversation, I realized my trust in my wife's fidelity had been sorely misplaced. Sandra was on her third marriage. Neither she nor her first two husbands could keep from straying. That was certainly true of her first husband. He'd screw any girl who would hold still long enough. Her second husband began an affair after he caught Sandra with a coworker. I thought that justified since he had already filed for divorce. Of course, Sandra claimed it was cheating. In her twisted ideology, she could do what she wanted, but her husband should remain faithful. I liked her present husband. He worked for the same company I did. As a service rep, he had to travel out of town a couple times a month. He was a hard worker and a friend. He met Sandra at a party when I invited him to my house. He and Sandra had been married for just shy of 2 years now. As soon as a house became available down the street, they bought it. Tammy never got married. She had been engaged a few times, but got cold feet each time. I suspected she wanted her freedom to mess around more than she wanted a husband. She'd joke how variety was the spice of life. "You witch, you know how much I want to go with you. But I love Jerry," Christine declared. "I don't want to screw up what I have with him." "So? Just because you love him doesn't mean you don't deserve to have some fun," Sandra declared. "These guys are just stress relief. They certainly aren't keepers for anything long-term. Just toys." "I take it Bob is out of town?" Christine asked. Sandra said yes until tomorrow, so she wanted to go get a little tonight. "You mean get a lot?" Christine giggled. "Both those guys are hung like horses. I'll bet they pop Viagra each time they have a date." "Oh yeah, that was so funny," Sandra said, laughing. "You squealed like a pig when he did that. You bitched him out saying you weren't going to let him screw you anymore, and a little later, there you were, begging for more. Admit it. You are as big a witch as me. So why do you need me tonight? You can handle both those guys. I know you've pulled trains before and never batted an eye," Christine asked. "You know those guys have a thing about screwing his buddy just screwed. Even when we all three screw them in the same room, they still refuse to switch partners. They are happy to watch us. We've all screwed each one of those guys, but never two guys the same night. Brian is gone tonight. If you don't go, I'll have to pick either Eric or Richard, and whoever is left out is going to be pissed. I could screw, but I don't think they'd be happy with that. Damn girl, I am excited now just from us talking. Christine giggled. If you'll agree to go, I'll do everything. Sandra said, I want to get laid tonight. I want to have sex and those guys will do it. My problem is getting away. Christine said, usually I just go with you and Tammy when Jerry goes to the fish camp. He thinks I don't like to sit around out there in the swamp. I like it sometimes. I just like to get screwed. And I might have to give up these boy toys before too long. We are talking about having a baby. None of those guys look enough like Bob to risk letting them knock me up. And they refuse protection. Okay, how about this? You tell Jerry that Tammy just broke up with her latest boyfriend, which is true by the way. She is feeling bad about it, so we need to go over and console her. Maybe drink wine and just have a girls' night. That'll also give you an excuse for staying out really late, or even not come home until morning. We'll take my car and claim to be too drunk to drive home. Tammy will back us up. You pick out a hot little dress and get your heels and take it to my house before Jerry gets home. Then you leave here dressed in regular casual clothes and change at my house. Jerry is sitting here none the wiser waiting for you. I know. Just to really get him going, I'll be here. I'll thank him for being so considerate of our friend and give him a big hug. Leave my husband be, you witch. Christine laughed. You are supposed to be a happily married woman now, remember? Plus, I don't want to share Jerry. Sandra giggled. You'll share everything with other men, but you don't want to share your man, huh? Nope, was the answer. I wouldn't want to share Bob either. I'm woman enough to give him everything he'd ever need plus have some left over for my boys. Well, let's get your clothes and stuff together and get it over to my house before Jerry gets home. Otherwise, we are screwed. Or rather, we don't get screwed. I waited, sitting there in the darkness of my office thinking about what I had just heard. My supposedly faithful wife had been cheating on me with at least these 3 guys and her 2 girlfriends. Who knows how many others preceded them. I waited until I heard them come back from the bedroom. Let me peek outside first to make sure Jerry is not pulling up. Sandra said, okay, coast is clear. Let's haul. I heard the front door open and close. I headed out the back door and around the house. I watched as Christine and Sandra turned to the right towards her house, 2 houses down the street. As soon as they were out of sight, I turned left at a fast walk. Before I got to the next block, I was already dialing my brother. My guts were churning from the anger I felt. Yes, I had loved Christine with all my heart until about a half hour ago. We had even been talking about starting a family. What I heard soured my feelings, filling me with rage. I started imagining several scenarios, from following her and shooting the scumsucker she was cheating with to using one of those telescoping batons and breaking a few bones. Both scenarios would get me arrested. I pulled out my phone and called my brother. Oh shit, dude. Jason declared when I explained the situation. I had no idea they were doing that stuff. Tammy is one hot 304. You know I screwed her a few times before I met Sue. Tammy is a hot, but not marriage material. I kept wondering who else she might be doing. Sandra was a wild card too. I figured she might be a wild, but not somebody for any kind of relationship. So what are you gonna do? Jason knew the girls almost as long as I had. I told him to come pick me up. By the time he picked me up 20 minutes later, the car dealership called to tell me my car was ready. I had him drive me there. Let's go to the grill and have a beer. I have some of the guys meeting us there. Jason said when I came outside after paying my bill. I was not feeling like drinking, but Jason told me to buck up and be there. I got you covered. I followed his lead. I knew both guys waiting for us. They were mutual friends of my brother and me. They'd have my back. One had gone through a divorce a few years before. He told me how bad it was, but then laughed and repeated the old joke about why divorces were so expensive. They were worth it. I told the 3 that I did not really have that much to lose in a divorce. We had just bought our home 3 years before, so had almost no equity to speak of. I had been concentrating on paying off my college loans as fast as possible, so we had only a few thousand in savings and checking combined. Christine made almost as much selling medical supplies as I did as a consultant. Alimony was not an issue, nor were children. I wanted revenge. Scorched earth. I wanted to identify the scumsucker and do as much damage to them as possible. I had no idea who they were. Having stated my goals, the 3 men started grinning. We can do this, Don said. We go to the bar, or wherever they are going to meet. I'll watch the scumsucker and get their license plate numbers. You know my brother is a cop. I can find out who they are. Do you happen to have a Find Your Phone app on her cell? Ed asked. I nodded. Christine was always leaving her phone somewhere. Usually all I had to do was call it and listen for it to ring. But sometimes it was in her car. For someone who needed it so much for work, Christine was very careless. I thought briefly to wait and see if I could get information off her phone, but I had the impression these liaisons were scheduled by Tammy and Sandra. Christine went along as another set of willing to screw. Damn, boy, Don said with a chuckle at my statement. You aren't cutting your wife any slack. My soon-to-be ex-wife, the witch. I corrected him. Jason and Ed called their wives to tell them they had to help a buddy out tonight, and they would explain later. Don was still single. He was still too gun-shy to even have a steady girlfriend. How big are these guys if it comes to that? Ed asked. Just want to know if I need to have my telescoping baton handy. I told him I had one and would be carrying it, but I did not plan to stand around long enough to get into trouble. I was going to let them know they were caught, take some pictures and get out of Dodge. If Don could watch them and get their license plates, we'd have enough. Yeah, a fight might kinda spoil the mood tonight, and a shooting would be worse. I knew Ed shared the same philosophy as Jason, Don and myself. Never start trouble, and get away if you can. But before you let yourself get your butt handed to you, you nuke the other scumsucker. Hey dude, would you mind if I pop Christine later? Ed asked, grinning. You don't have to wait as far as I am concerned. I am finished with her. You might have to take after her boyfriend tonight though. I grinned back. Only thing, as good as she is, I'm not sure if she is worth being your final sex. You know Melody is gonna cut off as soon as she finds out. Don and Jason chortled. The banter made me feel a little better. Leaving the three to get ready for tonight, I headed home. My phone rang before I got there. It was Christine. Hey babe, she began, cheerfully. Look, I know we talked about going to dinner tonight, but something came up. Yeah, which, like your boyfriend's shit. Tammy is all upset. It seems she broke up with her latest boyfriend and she needs to talk it out. Christine began. I asked her if he caught her screwing some other guy. She stuttered in surprise. I don't know why. Just that she is really upset. She thought this guy might be the one. I laughed at that. I could not help it. Seriously, she is upset. Sandra and I are going to go over to her house and sit with her. Probably drink a bottle or 3 of wine. Whatever it takes. We just want her to know we care about her. You don't have a problem with that, do you? I'd never have a problem with somebody taking care of a friend in need. I said, solid relationships are hard to come by. You know, somebody you trust and know has your back and is looking out for you at all times. Christine seemed to pause. Or was that just my imagination? Thanks, honey. I'll be heading out in a few. I told her I would be home in just a few minutes myself. She was still there when I arrived. Not going to take a bag along in case you stay over? I asked, when I got home to see her with only her purse. Like you and Sandra have too much to drink to drive safely? She stammered and said she had a toothbrush in her purse. Yeah, I guess with only you 3 women there you can sleep in the nude. I laughed. She colored nicely. She walked out the door. I hustled to my room to take my suit off and change into jeans and a shirt that would be suitable to wear into a bar. I wanted a shirt I could wear outside my pants because I clipped my pistol inside my pants on my right flank. I put my own telescoping baton in my right back pocket and my wallet in my left. I hoped I would not have to use either weapon, but I would rather hurt somebody than get hurt myself if it came down to it. Arrest would be inevitable either way. I called my brother Jason. He had hustled home himself as soon as we left the bar. He had traded cars with Don to keep his from being recognized. I walked out my front door and began the trek to the left again. Jason picked me up. We made a block and sat down the street where we could watch Sandra's house. We hoped they had not left already, but honestly figured the women would take some time to get ready. After an hour of sitting, we were both bored and angsty. According to the Find the Phone app, she was still at Sandy's, but I wondered if she left it behind. I decided to call Christine. Hey, I said when she answered. How is Tammy doing? She stammered. I did not let her get too far. Put her on and let me talk to her. I'll give her a little pep talk. Maybe I can introduce her to one of the guys at the office. Worked for Sandra. She and Bob seem pretty happy. We aren't there yet. Christine answered. Sandra and I are still at her house. I asked her why they were taking so long to leave. Sandra had some calls to make first, and we wanted to talk a little before we went over to Tammy's. Christine answered smoothly. We'll be leaving here soon. You still home, or did you go out to eat? Sorry, I did not have time to cook you something. No. Jason came by and picked me up. We are gonna grab a bite to eat and maybe a drink or two since you will out late if you even come home tonight. She sounded relieved and told us to drive safely. I suspected she was afraid I would walk over to Sandra's house. It would be very hard for them to explain why they were half-dressed or all dolled up, witchy makeup, perfume, or dressed in sexy lingerie. If I was standing at the door, they could not change back fast enough to not get caught. I hung up. Jason was grinning. Fun screwing with them, huh? Then he sobered. Of course it is too bad it came down to this. I nodded but told him at least now I knew, so I could cut my losses and get on with my life. So no way are you going to try to work this out, even if we lose them tonight and can't prove they are cheating. I shook my head and told him the conversation I overheard earlier was enough for me. 20 minutes later, Sandra's garage door opened and she backed out. We followed her easily. The women had no idea they might be followed, so probably never looked behind them. They were more likely discussing getting screwed and revving their engines. I'd bet they wouldn't even waste much time drinking. It was not like they had to seduce anybody or even play the game of being seduced. Their goal was to screw as much as they could. I called Don and Ed to keep them apprised. They were already on the move. Sandra pulled up into the lot of a fairly quiet bar we all knew. A quiet place known to be a pickup bar. They had a little music, but for the most part you sat and drank and talked. Decide if the person you were talking to was somebody worth a hookup. If not, you went home or waited for the next person. Nobody gave anybody else a second glance unless they were contemplating the potential for a future tryst. Damn, Christine looks hot. So does Sandra. Jason observed as we watched her and Sandra get out of their car. From our position, we could see both women adjust their tight dresses. I'll bet they aren't wearing panties either unless they are thongs, I said crassly. And then it would be just to put on a brief show for their boy toys before they got down to business. Don and Ed pulled up. They came over, and I told them what the women were wearing. We watched as a few men arrived and go inside. We had no idea if they were this Eric and Richard. I did not want to go inside too early and spoil the surprise. Ed said he would go in and see if the women were sitting alone or not. Both he and Don wore ball caps. I hoped Christine did not recognize them too early. He called from inside and said he had barely got his beer before two guys sat down with the women. They kissed the women like they were going screw right there in the bar. He told us where they were sitting. He quickly finished his beer and then came outside to help Don identify the guys' cars. He would stay close in case we needed help. Jason and I had our phones out and recording as we walked inside. Without saying anything, we stepped up and videoed them for a few seconds, capturing them nuzzling each other, arms intertwined. Sandra looked up and squealed when she saw us. "Hello, witches," I said in a much louder voice than necessary. Christine's facial expression was priceless. She began to babble. "Carry on, witch," I announced loudly. A hush fell over the bar. "Don't mind me, and don't bother to come home. I'll pack your shit and have it out on the lawn tonight. You can haul it over to that other witch's house." I pointed at Sandra with my free hand. "And you guys might as well keep these married witches after you have your fun tonight. I don't want the 304 anymore. I'm sure Sandra's husband will not want her when he gets wind of this either." One of them started to get to his feet. "Don't be stupid, a-hole." I turned slightly and showed him the butt of my Glock above my belt line. Even in the subdued lighting, he paled visibly. Jason and I turned and walked out. I wondered how long it would be before I got my first phone call or text. 10 minutes. "Yes? What do you want? Boyfriend finished playing with you?" I asked snidely. I put it on speaker for Jason's enjoyment. "Damn it," Christine said. "It's not what it looks like. These guys are just in town on business. One is an old friend of Sandra's. She needed somebody to go along as a buffer." I could not believe she gave me the "it's not what it looks like" line. I guess that was all they could come up with in 10 minutes. I laughed. "Yeah, the guy's one arm was so far around your neck he could reach your body. His other hand was under the table. I wonder if it was under your dress as well. I can't tell from the video, but it doesn't really matter. You lied. You cheated. We are through." I heard a Jerry, "Please," as I hit the icon to end the call. "You know I am going home with you tonight," Jason said. I looked sideways at him in surprise. "Don't argue about it. For the last few hours you have been running on adrenaline fueled by anger. Acting pretty normal if a little hyper. You are gonna crash soon, and it will hit you. I'm gonna be there to keep you from either doing something stupid or falling apart." I told him quietly I appreciated it. He handed me his phone and told me to go to his contacts to call his wife. What the hell was she thinking? Sue, Jason's wife, screamed over the phone. I'd put her on speaker. "She is out cheating? Throw the witch's shit in the front yard and lock the door." I had no choice but to crack up laughing. "Thanks, Sue," I said. "I'm glad you have my back. I appreciate it. I'd do the same thing to Jason if he cheated on me," Sue said. "And if I cheated on him, I'd know to expect that or worse. Jason, you stay with Jerry tonight and help him. Maybe you guys ought to consider taking a few days and go to the fish camp and get drunk once you get a handle on things. I love my sister-in-law. Okay, first things first. Whiskey, tequila, rum, or beer?" Jason asked as we got to my house. I told him beer was safer. He fetched 2 and put several more into the fridge to chill. "Now, do we start to bag her shit up?" he asked with a grin. I knew it would not matter in the long run. I probably could not keep her out. I did not care about the house anyway, but it would make a statement, and I planned to make that statement as public as possible. We got a box of trash bags and began to stuff all her possessions inside, starting with her clothes. We began to pile them up in the front yard close to the front of the house. That was to make sure I was not accused of giving her stuff away. Where we lived, if you put stuff on the curb, it was considered up for grabs. Often you would find an appliance, an old television, or whatever on the curb between trash pickup days. Couches and chairs were put there when people upgraded. It was commonly accepted this stuff was being given away. Anybody who wanted it could have it. It saved a trip to the dump and gave somebody in need an opportunity. I put Christine's stuff next to the house. I had told her it was going to be outside, so I hoped I would be covered. An hour later, all Christine's clothes and personal items were on the lawn. I made sure to change the combination on my gun safe and secured all the documentation I wanted to protect. I went to my home office to make sure nothing in there could not be replaced. I knew I'd have a hard time holding Christine liable for damage if she got the house and threw out something important. She pulled up with Sandra. "Are you seriously going to throw my stuff out of the house?" she screamed. I nodded. It was only about 9 o'clock by this point. We had started our adventure early. I reached inside the door and grabbed the air horn I had from my fishing and boating gear. I began to blast it. After several loud honks, neighbors appeared out of the nearby homes. They could tell something out of the ordinary was going on. A few held cell phones in case things got really interesting, but everybody stood watching. I stepped into the open, almost to the street. My wife, Christine, and her friend Sandra have been going out and screwing guys, having wild, uninhibited sex. I announced in a loud, clear voice. I heard Christine begin to cry and beg behind me. I caught them both tonight in a bar with their boyfriends. If anybody wants proof, I will be happy to show them the video. I want the witch out of my house. She can go stay with her witch friend. I will move out in the next few days, and she can come back. We are finished. I waved cordially. How could you do that? Christine asked. Incredulous I had the audacity to make such a public announcement. Sandra was well aware of the ramifications for herself. She knew if I had not done so already, I would soon call her husband. She sat on the lawn and bawled. She had only been married to Bob for a couple years, but they had a prenup. Knowing her history, I had taken him aside and warned him to protect himself. Trust but verify, I had said. He accepted my advice. You son of a witch. You have no proof of us doing anything, Sandra said, trying bluster. So we sat in a bar with a couple friends? Big deal. I pointed to the bags and told them they better be moved, or they might go missing. I honestly expected the police to show up soon. Sure enough, a squad car arrived. While all this was going on, Jason was in my office making sure our phone's contents, both his and mine, was uploaded to the cloud. I was busy explaining to the police how I caught my wife cheating. The question was who would leave the house tonight. One officer said it is usually the man. I told him I would be happy to, but my wife's stuff was already packed. He grinned knowing I was playing to his body camera. Now I am not sure my wife will not trash or destroy my possessions. I have a home office where I have sensitive data for my job. So if you want me to leave instead of her, I want to be able to secure my things. A police sergeant was called. I repeated my position. Barely keeping a straight face, he turned to Christine. Do you have a place to go tonight, ma'am, and to secure your stuff overnight? She tearfully nodded. I thought the cops were going to laugh when I offered to help Christine haul her things now in the trash bags down the street to Sandra's house. Half the neighborhood was now out watching the show. A few pitched in to help, hoping to hear the whole story. Please, can we talk? Kristen asked me pitifully. I told her maybe in a day or two. Then I maliciously added in a loud voice, but not until I figure all your boyfriend's spunk has drained out. I don't want to smell it on you. You had an hour after I left you at the bar before you came home. Plenty of time for you to get yourself screwed. The insult stung her so bad, she walked away crying. I saw a couple neighbors laughing. Every word I said would be repeated and likely enhanced as it made the rounds. With all the activity at my house, Eric and Richard thought they got away clean. They had not. Ed and Don watched them as they followed Jason and I outside and watched us drive away. Turning to Christine and Sandra, they gave the women a goodbye kiss, but no fondle as other bar patrons were likely watching. Both men moved to their own cars and watched Christine and Sandra get into Sandra's car. The delay made sure Ed and Don had ample time to get not only license plate number but make and model of the vehicles. They even took video as the men kissed the women goodbye, then followed the men to houses, presumably theirs. Ed and Don called Jason to see how we were doing. He told them to come to the house. We sat and laughed about what we had discovered. Ed was watching me closely. Finally, I looked at him and said, "What? Dude, you are gonna go off your nut. I'm gonna stick around to make sure you don't kill somebody," he offered. I was with Don when he went through it. My brother Jason said he said the same thing. "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, starting to get seriously pissed off. "Dude, I was there right where you are now. Just like Ed said." Don said, quietly. I went through a few days of crying in my beer thinking about what I had lost and feeling sorry for myself before I realized just how angry I was. I wasn't sure if I was more angry at myself for being stupid or my wife and her lover for cheating. It was them for sure. I barely curbed the impulse to kill the son of a witch and my 304 of a wife he was screwing. Don laughed at the memory. It took a few days, but I started feeling bad about not paying attention and seeing the signs for so long. I felt like an idiot. "So what did you do?" I asked. I suspected there was much more to the story than they had admitted. "Nothing. Just divorced the witch," Don said with a half grin. "Well, and let the guy's wife know." Ed began to snicker. I looked at him. I knew now there was far more to the story. "That is our official story," Ed said. Don lied and I swore to it. "Sorry, Don, but Jerry needs to hear this." Don smiled and told him to go ahead. We started a little campaign against the shitheads on the side. The guy knew Crystal was married, of course. "Sorry, Don. We try to not use her name. Her anointed name is Cheating 304, and that is how we refer to her," he offered his explanation. Within a day, the guy got his butt handed to him. He never saw who did it. He didn't need a lot of medical care. Just a pile of ice to stop the swelling in his scrotum. Anyway, even after his wife found out he was cheating on her and divorced him, taking him to the cleaners, the guy kept having all kinds of trouble. His garden shed where he kept his yard equipment caught on fire. His tires seemed to get a lot of flats. He could not even go to a bar without somebody sucker punching him. And once he went down, he caught a couple kicks to the balls. He had some really bad luck. His boss knew he was a cheater and didn't fire him, but told him he was on probation. When he tried to change jobs, that story followed him. I mean, just bad luck, you know? Ed said. "So what happened to him?" I asked. "Oh, he moved to Georgia. Tried to get a clean slate," Don said. "Funny, after a month or so, his new boss found out why he left Louisiana. Seems they don't like guys screwing coworkers there any more than we do here. He's had a rough couple years." "You really screw with him that much?" I asked. Neither man had ever told me this. "Seems like a lot of effort once you got rid of him." "Hey, everybody needs a hobby," Don laughed. "I mean, I still fish and hunt, but I'm not married, so I have a lot of free time at night. The hours just beg for me to do something. Unless there is a good movie on, of course." "Of course," Ed offered. "Tell him about the witch." "Oh yeah, she seems to have a hard time getting a steady boyfriend. I mean, more than 2 dates," Don said. "Guys might love a wild witch in their bedroom, but few like to hear their mothers rant at them after getting video of their new girlfriend and potential daughter-in-law doing a couple guys knowing she was married at the time and the guy was not her husband. And her co-workers all have copies of her escapades." Don laughed. "Especially the wives of her male colleagues. They are understandably concerned." I started laughing. Now I wish I had not jumped the gun. I said, wiping the tears from laughing so hard. "I'm gonna miss out on that fun." Don shrugged. "It's been fun, but I think it is about time to move on. The witch will always wonder, though. It does take a lot of effort. Of course she knows who is behind her problems. A few months ago, she asked me what she could do to get me to back off. I was very careful to not tip my hand or let her set me up. She would sue the shit out of me. That's why I never fessed up to you guys. Only Ed knew." We laughed. I began to wonder what I could do. "Let's think about it before we act," Ed offered. "You did jump quick. I mean, it has only been 7 hours or so since you found out about all this." The others agreed. Jason reported what his wife, Sue, said about taking some time and going to our fish camp and drinking. The camp was technically our father's, but Jason and I used it whenever we wanted. "Oh hell, yeah," Ed declared. "I know my wife will go along with that, especially if I bring back a pile of fish. Yeah, plus she might get a chance to join Christine with her big shit friend while we are out in the swamp." Don laughed as he teased his friend. "Nope, not with our prenup." Ed grinned in answer. "She'd have to divorce me first to get anything. Now I feel bad about not protecting myself." I confessed. I knew Christine's closest 2 friends are round-heeled witches. I should have thought through it. All 3 of the others told me we all make mistakes. I'd know better next time. Finally, we went to bed. I laid there for a while wondering if I could sleep. Then I realized discussions with my friends helped more than a group of counselors ever could. I felt better and rolled over and closed my eyes. I was gone. I woke up refreshed. I was not even hungover. Christine wanted to talk the next day. I asked her why. She walked over to meet me mid-morning. I told her I would only talk to her in the front yard, not behind closed doors. I had my phone in my pocket recording. She tried to explain how my coming to the bar stopped her from doing anything stupid. How many times before that did you screw them or their other buddy, Brian? I asked. She looked at me wide-eyed. She recognized I knew far more about her activities than what I saw in the bar last night. She stammered a few seconds but did not answer. I do have some good news and some bad news, I offered with a smile. She looked at me hopefully. The good news is I paid off the credit card before I canceled it. I also paid the utility bills, so they are handled for the next month. Plus I paid off all our loans. We are debt-free. The bad news is we only had about $700 left between savings and checking. I took my half out, I said. She looked at me in horror. I shrugged. Some of those bills were longer-term notes we were paying off like car notes. Both vehicles were in both our names. If she could or would not make the payments, I knew the banks would come after me to pay them off. Well, you still have several options, I said. You and Sandra can move in with your lovers or with Tammy. I'm pretty sure Bob is going to kick her out as part of the prenup they have. And I intend to put our house up for sale immediately. A real estate agent is the second call I plan to make Monday. The first is a lawyer. Can't we talk about this? Christine said plaintively. What is there to talk about? I asked. I was trying my best to stay tough. My heart was breaking, but my anger won out. You are the one who decided to screw around. Surely you knew what the result would be once I found out. Of course you never thought I would. But like I was saying, you have options. I'm sure your boyfriends will set you girls up so they have unfettered access to some hot tail. Christine looked at me like she had swallowed a baseball. Of course that might get complicated if any of them are married. I added. I haven't got the report on their personal lives yet. I'm waiting on that so I can tell their wives if they have any. They are married. They have kids. Christine gasped. You can't destroy their lives. And why is that an issue? I asked, trying to keep my voice as reasonable as I could. They had no concern for their marriages nor mine. So as far as I am concerned, all the dirty laundry gets dumped on the floor and everybody gets to see it for what it is. Every shit stain. Now unless you have something productive to say, why don't you go back over to Sandra's house? She began to walk away and then turned. Did you call Bob? She asked. I could tell that was one of the issues. Sandra wanted to know when Christine came over. I smiled and nodded. Of course I had told Bob. I did that last night before I got drunk. I brought him up to date and relayed the suggestions Don had given me about handling the finances first thing. Bob did not have as much debt as me, but he paid off and canceled his credit cards and took the 75% of the available cash, just like his prenup would have awarded. He knew as well as I did that Sandra would not be able to pay back money once she took it from the account. Her pissant part-time job would barely sustain her wine drinking and occasional lunch out. Bob called me back this morning to see what I had accomplished and to tell me he would be back in town late morning. I was busy with the money transfers and was half drunk when we talked last night. His anger and hurt was palpable. He had really loved Sandra. He had privately told me last year he felt guilty asking for the prenup, but got it anyway when I had insisted. Last night he reminded me of that conversation and told me how now he was glad he listened to me. I told him to get home safely and we would work this together. I watched Christine walk towards Sandra's house. She looked dejected. Her shoulders slumped as she shuffled along. Of course these women could come out on top and recoup their lives. They were beauties. All they had to do was to turn professional instead of be amateur witches. Online adult movies was a big option if not go full call girl. They could make a decent if not very nice living. I wished I had said that to Christine a few minutes ago. I'll have to remember to use the line later. I stuck my middle finger up at the retreating figure. One parting shot. I contemplated what Don had said last night. How everybody needs a hobby and his was to screw with his ex and her boyfriend. I did not have the information to do anything to any of those three guys yet, but I knew where Christine was vulnerable. Was it cruel? Sadistic? Even unwarranted? Yes to all of the above, but I did it anyway. I pulled out my cell phone. Hey, Miss Sullivan. I greeted the woman who answered. Since when have you called me Miss Sullivan? She asked. Not since you first started going out with Christine. I've always been Mom. Well, that is the problem. I said. I love you. You have always been there for me. But things have changed. I wanted you to know Christine and I are getting divorced. To say the almost 50-year-old woman was shocked would be an understatement. What? She exclaimed. A week ago you guys told me you had decided on having a baby. Well, that was before I found out Christine has been cheating on me. I said. She and her friends Sandra and Tammy have been seeing 3 guys whenever they can. From what I hear, it is a sex fest. Christine goes whenever I am at my fish camp. She begs off going there with me and entertains one of these guys instead. Miss Sullivan asked if I was sure. I have an audio recording of it, and last night followed her to a bar. Her behavior in the bar sure didn't pass the husband test. As a matter of fact, her actions would not be allowed in most bars in town. I said, I have video. That dumb witch. Miss Sullivan groused. I thought she had put her wild ways behind her when she married you. She said she had. She started crying. Please stay close, Jerry. I gotta go. She hung up. I felt bad for hurting this nice woman, but I also did not want Christine to set the narrative with her family and make me out the bad guy. 30 minutes later, I got an irate call from Christine. How dare you? You son of a witch, she yelled. What? I asked innocently. You know what? How could you tell my mom I was messing around? She screamed. Wasn't it the truth? I asked. She called me a few more names and hung up. Bob arrived. He did not bother to even stop at his house. He wanted to talk to me first. After we talked, and he had copies of both my audio file and the video of Sandra lip-locked with a man whose hands looked to be where they should not, we walked down to his house. I'm here to get my stuff, or at least enough clothes for a few days, he announced. Sandra looked back and forth between Bob and me. He pulled out his cell phone. If anything is damaged, destroyed, or otherwise tampered with, I will file criminal charges against you. Let this serve as notice, he warned. He walked around the house taking videos. I had not thought of that. I pulled out my own cell phone. Christine, I am going home and taking a video of our place. If anything is later destroyed or stolen, I will file criminal charges against you. And that includes if you let one of your lovers into the house and they do the damage. I had no idea if this was legal, but the result was great. Christine sad and bald. I doubt she would thought about destroying anything on her own, but I was not taking chances. 24 hours ago, I would not have dreamed she would cheat on me either. Bob grabbed several days' worth of clothes, and we carried it back to my house. You know, I really thought Sandra had changed her ways. She told me several times she had been a witch. Well, her description was pretty wild, but that was all behind her now. She wanted to be my loving wife and the mother of my kids. I feel like such a fool. She even went off the pill a few months ago. Oh shit. I hope she is not pregnant. I'd get a DNA test, of course, but even if I was the father, I'd still be screwed with child support. I told him to not worry about it until it happened. Don, Ed, and Jason came over with a couple cases of beer. So everything is cured with beer, huh? I quipped. Nope. It just makes it a little more tolerable. Don replied. I told them what I did to Christine. Don laughed and congratulated me. Bob had done something similar to me, covering his butt. His debt was less but now eliminated, and he had transferred his portion to another account. Jason laughed, saying he could take a long trip and spend weeks in Cabo with all the money now sitting in his checking account. Bob and I needed an account to put our money. I didn't have much, but he did. We could not set up an account last night, so we transferred our funds to Jason's. My brother ran the license plate numbers. He can't say anything officially, of course, but I have names and addresses. Don reported. I told them Christine said the guys were married and had kids. Well, before I have too much to drink, I want to see what I can find out about the wives. I said, Bob, I'm into the mood for a little scorched earth retribution. How about you? He grinned back and pulled his laptop out. Finding Eric and Richard was easier than I imagined. Both had Facebook profiles, complete with pictures of their wives and children. Their wives were in their contact lists. Getting a cell phone number for each woman was simple. Each man had a few contacts named Brian, and a couple were common. We did not want to notify the wife of an innocent man. I phoned and introduced myself to Richard's wife. I quickly came to the point. I explained the whole situation. To say the woman was angry would be an understatement. He had cheated before. She felt comfortable to let him go out with his two friends because she felt that would keep him from straying at least at those times. Let me guess, Brian is one of the friends, but he was not available last night. Do you know his wife? She did. I asked her if she would like to meet, and I would give her a copy of the audio file I had as well as the video I took last night. She definitely wanted to meet as quickly as possible. I offered to call Eric's wife, and she told me she would do that as well as Brian's and would call me back to arrange a meeting. 15 minutes later, she called me. I was astonished at the speed. She told me she was not about to waste time. I made copies of the recordings for both women. We met at a local coffee shop. Bob and I sat there and stood when 3 women in casual dress walked inside. The women looked to be in their mid to late 30s, a few years older than us. They wore minimal makeup, but each one was very pretty. I offered to buy them coffees, which they accepted. I played the original recordings for them. So this has been going on for a while, Kathleen, Richard's wife, observed. I told them I had no idea how the men met our wives. They had not seen either Sandra nor Christine before. I pulled up a picture of Tammy. Brian's wife recognized her. She works with Brian. Tamara something or other. I've seen her at company events. I'm guessing that is where this started. She and Brian had an affair, and it expanded to full-blown fest with the other women. Well, not fest. I corrected. It seems the guys refused to share his partner for the night, but swap around otherwise. And from what I heard, it was all very uninhibited. Any action is action acceptable. Eric's wife said, "Yeah, hearing that part about Eric going for your wife's body does not surprise me. I hope you aren't offended, but it sounds like your wife is a 304 from the way they described it." I assured her I was as surprised to hear that part of the conversation as she was. I explained I was going to file for divorce as soon as possible and what Bob and I did with our finances. I saw the gears turning. "Well, I am going to go shopping before I go home," Richard's wife announced. "There is a dress at a boutique I've had my eye on. Maybe I'll find a few dresses. A woman I know bought some stuff and took them back for the cash later. Maybe I'll get all dolled up and ask Richard if I look as good as Christine and Sandra did last night when he walks in the door. Just before I tell him to get out. He'll know something is up when Eric gets home to find his stuff on the lawn this afternoon anyway. I'm sure Eric will call him as soon as he drives up before even coming inside," Eric's wife stated. I told her I had bagged Christine's clothes. I might bag some just to help get it outside, but then I am dumping it all out. His suits are just getting tossed. I do like your idea of an air horn to alert the neighbors. You say you can buy them in the fishing section of any store? I nodded. Bob and I were openly laughing. We better get started. They are golfing this afternoon, and we'll be home about 6. I wonder how many of those golfing trips were spent with those women playing with there instead. Another round of laughter. I wondered how long the rage would last before the bawling began. These women were tough, but I remembered what Don had said. I said as much. We've discussed this amongst ourselves before. After I caught Richard the first time, we even insisted on us all getting post-nup agreements. Not too one-sided, but containing serious penalties, Kathleen stated. We sort of had a hypothetical plan to support one another and how we'd crucify our husbands for helping or covering if one of the other guys had an affair. Now we know they are all involved. Our kids are all in their teens. They are going to know tonight. They are old enough. The other women nodded. We said our goodbyes after exchanging phone numbers. It seems like those 3 scumsucker thought sharing the same 3 witches would be easy to hide. I never heard where they met. I'm guessing at Tammy's place mostly. They thought they had it under control. Bob offered, "Thank God your car needed to get some work done, and you didn't sit around waiting." Back at my house, we spent the rest of the afternoon drinking beer. We had to have food delivered for supper as none of us were safe to drive. Sandra called Bob. He put it on speaker. "Why did you have to involve Tammy and Brian? They weren't even there last night," she wailed. "All 3 of their wives are threatening divorce, and Brian's wife says she is going to report it to Brian's boss. Tammy called us all upset because she might get fired at the same time. I could not help it. I started chuckling. "Let me ask you something," Bob said. "We were betting you guys met most often at Tammy's house for your little sex fests. Motel rooms had to get pretty expensive and pretty limited in space." Sandra sputtered, but did not confirm nor deny. "Well, Tammy isn't it up to her eyeballs anyway. Too bad. She deserves what she gets." The actions the following week went as we expected. Bob and I hired the same attorney. We used the one who had drafted his prenup. Christine and Sandra were served at work midweek. Both houses were put up for sale. We listed the houses with the same agent as well. We explained the circumstances and said while we knew we did not have much equity, we were going to negotiate the sales, so we did not have much in the way of out-of-pocket expenses. I've always heard any endeavor is 90% preparation and 10% execution. A divorce is the same. Once we set things into motion, our part was pretty much finished. The lawyers would handle it from here. I found a small apartment. Separating the actual furniture and other community property was easy. Most of the stuff went into separate storage units, and we hired an estate sales company to sell the rest for cash. The one place I almost screwed up was in the courtroom. I began to make a comment about how the girls could make a good line going professional, if not actively whoring, then as online witches. The kick my lawyer gave me under the table raised a knot on my shin. "Dumb shit," she said, scowling at first, then softening it to a smile. There are things you cannot say in court. Christine's lawyer already mentioned you have told all her coworkers, friends, and family about her dalliances. You do not want a couple that with a comment about her to be hooker to support herself. It might be a bit of a stretch, but we do not want you to be accused of trying to force your ex-wife into trade with your actions. That might not play well, and you might find yourself paying her support. Just keep your comments to yourself. I nodded. Sandra, Christine, and Tammy were roommates once again after 7 years. Tammy could not afford the rent on her own after losing her job. It seemed she had a problem finding another job as good as the one she lost. Her new boss would somehow hear the story of her and her roommate witches. Every one of Christine's co-workers knew what she did to destroy her marriage as well. Her job seemed to have stalled, but I'd bet men were lining up for a shot at her despite their wives' watchful eyes. Sandra's job at the mall was not enough to support her without the others' help. Bob and I followed the girls' relationships for about a year after our divorce. We took a page out of Don's hobby book and let any man one of them dated more than twice know all about them. We finally got bored with the effort. Brian got fired at the same time as Tammy. I heard he had a few good job prospects. He certainly needed one. His minimum child support and alimony was set per his post-nuptial agreement. Although I felt for his family, his new boss and co-workers quickly found out the details of why he lost his previous position. He was not a happy camper treated as a pariah. Richard and Eric did not fare much better even though they still had their jobs. I never heard if they went to Tammy's for a booty call, but I would not have been surprised. Bob and I were happy to be bachelors for now. I was only 29 and not in a hurry to get remarried. I did have a few prospects. One of the best was the younger sister of one of Jason's co-workers. I met her at a barbecue party at Jason's house. I knew it was a setup. We went out several times and seemed compatible in bed and out. She took up enough of my downtime. I eased up on my part of the campaign against the 6 cheaters. We both agreed hypothetically to a prenup if we ever got serious enough to consider marriage. She didn't think one would be necessary, as she stated while at the fish camp one afternoon. If my husband ever cheated on me, I'd feed his butt to the gators. After I used his balls for fish bait. Feisty little Cajun girl. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.